Why do bad things happen to good people? As I watched through the episodes involving Kannabi Bridge, including the fate of Obito and the birth of Tobi, I thought about how such a kind boy could become a monster, and why it is that it had to happen at all. The bridge itself is called Kannabi Bridge, which means the bridge where the gods do not help in English. This entire situation is underlined by this bridge and sets the theme of abandonment. Abandonment of friends, abandonment from the gods, and abandonment of your own morality for relief. But at the same time, I wonder how true this undertone really is. Every day in our lives, we face hardships that are designed to strengthen us. Not always is the road easy, and a lot of times it tempts us to fall off our path. But let me ask, had Obito not suffered, had he not also become an issue for our heroes, then our heroes likely would not have increased in strength to the point where Naruto could have ever gained the strength to fight against the greater threat of the Otsutsuki. Imagine if Isshiki came to Konoha and no one was strong enough to face him. Because we face hardships doesn't mean we're abandoned. It's a trial, a test. Your hardships could be for you, to test you, strengthen you, or perhaps it's for someone else. In the end, what matters isn't why the bad things happen to good people, but how the good people respond. Last time we took a look at a possible Obito who, during the time he could have achieved his greatest victory, felt the call of his heart draw him back to the light. Instead of resisting it, he gave in and came back, proving that when he fell to his darkest thoughts and desires, he was still not abandoned. But let's view this Obito further and see how far he'll go with this. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you're subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Obito sat in a cell. Not that one like this could ever truly hold him. Minato knew that as well. Obito was only here of his own volition. As he did so, he saw the door slowly creak open. Minato came in, flanked on both sides by shinobi of the intelligence unit. Minato grabbed a chair and pulled it over and sat down in it. He spoke. Tell me where you've been. What has happened to you since the day that Kannabi Bridge fell? I was crushed under the stones, Obito said, motioning toward the right side of his face. I was buried, but I felt no pain, ironically. My body must have been in shock. But when I next woke up, I was rescued. My body repaired with this strange substance to which I'd only been told was the cell culture of Hashirama Senju. It was only then that I started feeling pain, though they kept me mostly sedated. The cells began affording me incredible powers. Control over the wood nature transformation, as well as above average regeneration ability. I could start utilizing my Mangekyo Sharingan whenever I wanted without going blind. After awakening, I couldn't move for quite some time. Not because I was paralyzed though, but because any movement might disturb the healing process the right side of my body was going through. But I could see things, and one of the things I could see was a man. A man? Minato questioned. Obito nodded. He was elderly to the point of insanity. He was required to be on life support to even simply survive. But despite this, he was spry enough to be capable of walking on his own for short distances. He told me he was my ancestor. Minato felt a chill run down his spine. Don't tell me. You mean? Obito nodded. Madara Uchiha. The room was silent for a while. Obito continued speaking. He said he rescued me to perform a job for him. A job I had no other choice but to accept. And so, considering that I couldn't necessarily fight back, I accepted. Once I could move around again, I began to retrain my body and increase my strength, regaining all the abilities I lost after my wounds, and even developing a few more. I spent a long time getting used to my new body. During this time, I was exposed to a strange type of creature known as a Zetsu that appeared to be an artificial human made of the same cells that composed half my body. These creatures were loyal to Madara, and therefore were loyal to me so long as I was under Madara's will. Madara explained to me that he had somehow developed a new dojutsu during the time he spent away from Konoha, and that it had granted him access to the same powers as those of the Sage of Six Paths. But his greatest powers lay outside of the standard six paths and inside the hidden seventh one, the Outer Path. He possessed a massive statue that he called the demonic statue of the Outer Path. This was how he was being kept alive. He said that the statue was actually a husk, the husk of a creature of massive proportions called the Ten-Tails, and that it was the origin of the 9 chakra beasts that roamed the world, and that if they could be regathered together, incredible strength could be unlocked. He wished to use this beast to accomplish his goal of bringing peace through a planet-wide genjutsu that he called the Infinite Tsukiyomi. Minato was confused. The Infinite Tsukiyomi, the same technique you were going to use. Obito nodded. Given that Madara was now too old, he had already removed his new Rinnegan, and he had them transplanted into someone else, and prepared to give up his dream to me. In return, I was supposed to work at manipulating the child he transplanted the Rinnegan to, and cause the child to utilize the outer path technique Samsara of Heavenly Life to revive Madara into a younger body, so he could accomplish his goals. He bequeathed both his name and his dream to me. I was to work in the world as Madara and do anything I could to manipulate world events to facilitate his revival, as well as the completion of our Project Tsukinome. And to that end, I did. With the unsuspecting help of Danzo Shimura, I manipulated the Akatsuki into falling from their peace-loving organization, and led to Nagato's fall from grace into the monster he calls pain. Minato stopped for a second. Wait, Nagato? As in Nagato Uzumaki, the other student of Jiraiya? Obito nodded. Now known as Pain, he's on a warpath to cause the bloodiest war in history to facilitate peace. But he's not the only one I've been dealing with. Do you know Yagura Karatachi? You mean the newest Mizukage who's spreading the blood mist ideology through his village? Obito looked down and nodded. I started that. Minato was surprised. The idea was that I was going to join the Akatsuki, and my manipulation of Yagura was designed to set up a villain for us to fight. I was making an economy for the Akatsuki, something that would boost notoriety and result in us making a successful business to help fund the plans we were pushing toward. Minato began to massage his temples. Obito then spoke again. A couple of months ago, I visited Konoha. I was gonna visit the grave of Rin, and Kakashi was there. I overheard him talking to her about the mission he was on, and that he was safeguarding Kushina during her pregnancy. I heard that and saw a golden opportunity play out. So I secretly watched Kushina, waiting for the time she would give birth, knowing that the strongest of all tailed beasts would be vulnerable. But in the end, I couldn't do it. That's because you're a good person, Obito, Minato said. But I'm not, Obito responded. I got a lot of people killed. I killed the friends of Nagato to destroy his mentality, to turn his loving heart into one fueled by hatred. I brought Yagura under Genjutsu to create a nation of pure suffering so I could make money. I killed Anbu agents. I killed midwives. I'm not a good person. I am not a good person. Minato looked down. I'll admit, you stumbled quite a bit, but are you gonna sit there and call it quits? If you've made a mistake, then you need to make it right. You need to reverse the mess you've made. I can't reverse it. I think I might be able to remove the Genjutsu from Yagura, but the people he's killed, the things he's done, that's on me and it can't be undone. I can't unbreak Nagato. I can't unkill the people who died because of me. That may be true, Minato said, and that's something you need to carry for the rest of your life. But you can still try your best. Dedicate your life to undoing the damage, to help those you've hurt or stop them. Obito sat there. Would you not send anyone else to prison? Perhaps even execute them? Minato sat there and thought about it. Honestly, I probably would. But I know you. Oh, so this is nepotism, Obito said. Minato shook his head. No, I'm basing this on my understanding of who you are, who you were, and who you could be. You have the potential to choose redemption. Not everyone is the same, and I have to make judgments based upon that fact. If anyone else displayed the same characteristics as you, I might offer the same. This is my ruling. If you don't want to atone, of course, I can simply put you in prison and schedule an execution. Would that make you feel better? Obito seemed to turn pale. I would like to atone for my mistakes, master. Minato smiled. Good. I'll let you out of here when everything's set up. There's someone who's gonna want to see you again, and you owe it to him to say hi. After all, it's not nice to eavesdrop without letting your friend know. Obito grew nervous suddenly. You mean Kakashi? You want me to talk with Kakashi? Minato nodded. Kakashi went through a lot. You may feel quite a bit of pain for what you've been through and for what you've done, but Kakashi has as well. He feels very alone and is withdrawing from everyone. I think throwing you back into his life is exactly what he needs. Minato stood and began to make it toward the door. He looked back only once and smiled. It's nice to have you back, Obito. Minato then left. Obito sat there in silence in his cell. He thought about Kakashi and about Rin and about how he hadn't seen them in a long time. In fact, Obito had also withdrawn from others. Hiding behind a mask, he was Kakashi's mirror image, an idea of what Kakashi could have become as a rogue shinobi, while Kakashi was an idea of what Obito could have become returning to the leaf. Darkness and light, swirling forever in this world of gray, where morality and immorality seemed only to be divided by the thin line people drew in their minds. In some twisted mind, two wrongs make a right, or at least that's what is believed so long as the right doesn't make them feel bad. Selfishness kills, and Obito realized that. Maybe Minato-sensei's right. Maybe that's how I can show my remorse. I can use this wisdom I found to make the world a better place. It wasn't long after that Obito was released from his cell. He'd be brought to the Hokage's office and sat down, where Minato would smile at him as if he had something planned. And that is true, he did. It wasn't a secret. He was bringing Obito and Kakashi back together again. The smile on his face was based in the knowledge that his students were about to be very, very happy again. But all the same, Obito was nervous. He hadn't talked with Kakashi in a long time. Of all the things he had done since being crushed by that boulder, this was one of the most strenuous. Suddenly, the door opened and a white-haired young man wearing the standard uniform for a member of the Anbu stepped in. "You wish to see me, Lord Fourth?" Kakashi asked. Obito sort of shrunk into his seat. Minato stood and walked to Obito and forced his seat to turn around to face Kakashi. Obito still looked down, trying to hide his face, but nothing he did could fool him. Kakashi, after all, still possessed the Sharingan Obito had gifted him, and it caused him to recognize him. Kakashi's eyes widened as it felt like the fishbowl he'd been living in had suddenly been tossed through the air and shattered on the ground. It was almost like a physical punch to the liver. He felt his heart rate spike. Obito looked up, only one eye looking back at Kakashi, his other eye left as an empty socket, a reminder of the loss he had suffered. Minato walked to Kakashi and sort of nudged him in the direction of Obito. "Go ahead, talk. I'm just gonna step outside and give you two some privacy." Minato exited the room and closed the door behind him. It felt like eternity passed in the span of those few short moments. Kakashi snapped back to reality. He walked over and took a seat. As he did, he spoke. "I can't believe it's really you." Obito offered a small smile. He wasn't quite sure if he even was really Obito anymore, physically or spiritually. Physically, he was almost half made up of Hashirama Senju's cells, and spiritually, mentally, he was no more than a shell of who he'd previously been. He sighed. "It's been a long time, Kakashi." Kakashi hugged him. Obito was shocked by this. Maybe neither of them were the same as they used to be. For Kakashi to hug Obito like this showed emotional growth. He had always had Kakashi wrong, thinking he was only ever a stickler who wanted one thing and one thing only. He had always thought he only valued the rules, but perhaps there was more to it than this. "The world's really chewed us up and spit us out, eh, Kakashi?" Kakashi, pulling back, nodded. He looked like he was about to speak, but couldn't bring himself to. "Do you remember the day when you made me promise to protect Rin?" Obito asked. "Yeah, I remember it." "Well, Cutting off Kakashi again, Obito spoke. "I know, Kakashi. I know what happened in Kiri." Kakashi swallowed again. "I can't. I failed you. I failed to fulfill the promise. I can't apologize enough for this." Obito sat there. "I can't lie to you, Kakashi. Your failure to protect her? I'm having a hard time finding forgiveness in my heart." Kakashi was silent. Obito sighed. "I guess the same is true of me, though. I did some really messed up things to a lot of good people, out of selfishness." He looked up. "I'm seeking to make up for my mistakes. Maybe you can do the same." Kakashi nodded. "I will. I'll make up for it." Obito thought about it. "I believe Minato-sensei expects us to both be partners in this, so it's only fair that I inform you about myself and what I've been doing and who I've become since we last spoke." Kakashi nodded. "I probably should do the same." So the two of them caught up with each other, talking about the things they did. Honestly, Kakashi was surprised to hear some of the things Obito had done, but all the same, could he really blame him? The life of an Anbu agent was one of strife and constant battle. It wasn't out of the ordinary for them to do horrid things. Kakashi had done many horrible things in his life that he felt he could never make up for, so it really boiled back down to what Obito had said to start the conversation. The world really had chewed them up and spat them out. And so they had decided to work together on this, to help make up for my failures and doing the things you couldn't do. And due to my failures being what set you down this path, I'm going to help you rectify your mistakes, is what Kakashi declared to him. "I won't leave you behind again to be crushed under the pressures of the things you have to do. A shinobi who would abandon even one of their friends is worse than trash. You taught me that, and now I'm going to live by it as well." Obito was touched by this. He had never thought that Kakashi would ever transform as he had. Kakashi's life had set him down a course of pain and suffering, for distrust and selfishness, hiding his true feelings and desires, and being unable to accept the care of others into his life due to past traumas. But just as the naive boy Obito had been transformed by the world's cruelty, the cruel boy Kakashi had been transformed by the world's kindness. The yin and yang dyad between them was both contradictory and complementary, and ensured that their teamwork would be well-rounded, and this couldn't have thrilled Minato more. Minato was proud of his students for their resolve and their drive to make themselves and the world a better place. Their paths to this position had been very different, but equally painful, and now that they had reached it, they had become the very shinobi that Minato had hoped they'd become all along. "There are things you must do," Minato stated to Obito and Kakashi. "The first thing is, we need to undo the effects you've put on Yagura." Obito thought about it. "That's gonna be easier said than done. I need to find him and dispel the genjutsu personally, and there's a failsafe in it that will kill him should it not be dispelled properly. And to do that, I need to be right there." Minato spoke. "Then that's your first mission. Head to the Land of Water and meet with Yagura. But you can't do this while under official Konoha business. If the mission fails, the village needs plausible deniability. So if you please, return your headband, Kakashi." Kakashi would remove his headband and in return opt for an eye patch to cover his Sharingan. Obito at this time would opt for an eye patch to cover his missing eye. Minato, seeing this, couldn't help but comment that they were twinsies, much to the chagrin of both. Having removed all identifiers that they were ever working with Konoha, Minato spoke. "If you go and are caught or killed, Konoha will disavow having ever known you. I know that sounds rough, but we can't risk another world war right now. We're only just now crawling out of the Third Shinobi World War. Do you understand?" Obito and Kakashi both nodded their heads. "Good. You're free to commence your mission at your leisure." And so the two began to prepare. They began stockpiling weapons, most of which would be repurposed farming equipment, such as sickle scythes, chains, and kunai, each of which could be used together for a deadly combination weapon. And despite kunai often being associated as weapons of shinobi, one could never forget that they originally had been utilized as a masonry tool, and therefore could be carried without the classification of being a weapon. These items they kept close. They would, wearing simple haris and straw hats, board the vessels of trade that would begin travel between Kiri and Konoha. As the boats set sail toward their destination, Kakashi and Obito had plenty of time to speak with each other. Obito would be pressed against the railing of the old junk as it glided through the water, with Kakashi appearing close behind. "I've never seen you without your mask, you know," Obito stated. Looking over at Kakashi, he had begrudgingly removed the gaiter he so often donned as it would make him look too conspicuous. Not to say that it wasn't still around his neck, though. In fact, Obito had one as well, but at the current moment, wearing it would simply make them stand out. After all, farmers usually did not have a reason to hide their identity. Kakashi would sigh. "I feel exposed without it. I don't like it." "You're just being paranoid. To be frank, people might actually recognize you if you wear a mask like that. Sometimes the best way to keep people from recognizing you is to not wear a disguise at all." Kakashi looked at him. "You sound even more Anbu than I." "The world forced me to adapt," Obito said. "I more or less have a grasp on what it means to be a shinobi now." Kakashi looked down. "I ought to return my Sharingan to you." Obito looked over. "Why?" Kakashi looked out on the water. "Coming back here. To Kiri. It reminds me of Rin. This was the last place I saw her. I came here alone on a personal mission to rescue her under the good graces of Lord Third. I wanted to keep my promise, and I failed." Kakashi looked over at Obito. "When you gave me this Sharingan, you did with the stipulation that I use it to protect Rin, and I failed to do that. I ought to return it to you." Obito raised a hand and waved it off. "Keep it. You lost your original protecting me. Consider it a thank you at the very least." Kakashi looked back down on the water. He couldn't see very far. The air had become thick with mist, the namesake of the village to which they were sailing. "You know, if I could have had it my way, I would have died that day for her," Kakashi said. "I know you loved her, and if I could have traded my life to preserve yours and hers, I would have." Obito sighed. "I know you would have. There's no point in looking back on that anymore. The past is in the past, and we can't change what we've done, nor the mistakes we made. There were nights I spent healing, thinking why it had to be me. After Rin died, I would stay up all night wondering what it would have been like if I had not pushed you out of the way. That day, if our positions were switched, would our fates be different? Would I have your life and you mine? Or would it be the same story, played out as before?" Obito looked over. "I learned a long time ago that there's no point in wondering what might have been. Those opportunities, they're gone. They'll never come back. They'll never be undone. But from here, we can at least try to limit the damage." Kakashi looked down. "What more can I say then?" Obito smiled. "You don't have to say anything. It's actions that are required now. Let's end the genjutsu in Yagura." They would eventually pull into a port and make their way to the village hidden in the mist. Set in lush greenery, every plant nourished with the high moisture content in the air, a sprawling metropolis spanned. Twisting, turning, winding roads ran out from every direction as buildings towered up into the sky. To be frank, I didn't have to do much to make Kiri seem like a bad place. The way the citizens are treated here is appalling. especially if you're a clan that happens to be annexed to Kiri. But all it took was a little altering of Yagura to really cause a tip in the balance. A little cruelty here, a power-hungry desire there. That's all I needed to convince him to do. From there, the village just sort of started collapsing on its own. Kakashi looked at him. Last I heard, Yagura had the three tails, correct? Obito nodded. Yes, I considered it an act of vengeance against the village that killed the love of my life. They made my heart bleed, so I made their village bleed. As Obito said that, there was a darkness in his heart boiling to the surface that was almost visible to Kakashi. How did you do it? They say a Jinchuriki is immune to Genjutsu. Obito seemed to calm as he looked over. They generally are. I just cast the Genjutsu twice. That's actually how I set the failsafe. If anyone but me breaks the Genjutsu the wrong way, the Genjutsu on the beast will persist, and it'll switch to completely closing off its chakra. A tailed beast must always choose to give some chakra to their Jinchuriki. If they ever decide not to, the Jinchuriki would die. The Jinchuriki is dependent upon their chakra, but that would also kill the beast. If the host dies, the beast dies too. If the Mizukage's Genjutsu and the tailed beast's Genjutsu aren't broken at the same time, the beast will inevitably set off its chakra and kill the host. Kakashi was surprised by the ingenuity of this plan, not only to find a way to cast a Jinchuriki under Genjutsu, but to somehow utilize the only flaw and make it a boon. That was skill. Obito had more potential than he ever displayed. In Kiri, the caste system dictates who's respected and who isn't. Those close to Kiri get high positions, and those who are conquered get low ones. And it's the conquered who are forced to partake in Yagura's, my twisted blood mist ritual. That's only sown discontent in people here, just as I had assumed. My plan was that someone would eventually hire us to produce a coup, slowly giving us influence in a village as powerful as Kiri. Kakashi listened. And this group you were joining, it still exists today? Obito nodded. In all honesty, it's a group I was responsible for creating, but we're moving one step at a time. Right now, let's deal with Yagura. And so the two of them began making their way through the village. Given the knowledge that they had, they managed to locate a small rebel cell of people who weren't too happy with Yagura's rule. Among these people was a member of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen of the Mist, a rather young man named Zabuza Momochi. He wasn't the only one here. There was a hunter nin that was a part of this group as well. Obito made mention that the man's name was Ao, and he was unique as he possessed a Byakugan. I'm going to attack him now, Zabuza said as he slammed his fist against the table. No, we're going to wait. Something bigger's at play here, Ao said. We can't move until we figure out what. Zabuza scoffed at him. Like that matters to us. What matters is removing the corruption from Kiri. That's it. Obito raised his gaiter and sat down. The two men looked over at him. Zabuza seemed halfway ready to carve him in twain. You're at the wrong table, stranger. Obito sighed and began to speak with the same voice as Madara.
Are you two so unintelligent that you would argue about such a sensitive topic in a public area? No wonder Kiri's so weak. All the smart shinobi are leaving.
Zabuza pulled the executioner from his back. Give me one good reason why you should keep breathing. Obito looked up at him.
You couldn't kill me if you wanted to.
Zabuza, having lost himself to bloodlust, swung the blade at Obito, causing the blade to pass clean through. Obito, however, seemed completely unaffected. That was the power of the Kamui. Zabuza was confused.
As I said, it seems only the asinine remain behind in the cesspool called Kiri.
What do you want, stranger? Ao asked. Obito spoke.
I'm actually here to help you fix this situation. It's possible to solve this without killing Yagura.
And how is that? Ao asked. Obito continued.
By breaking the Genjutsu he's under. If we do, things will change.
Ao seemed to light up with understanding. So it's a Genjutsu, he said.
Indeed, and I know how to break it. It requires me to get close.
And do you think we're just gonna trust you? Zabuza asked. Obito looked at them.
Do you have any other choice?
He has a point. How do we trust you? Ao stated. Obito then spoke.
Because I'm the only one who knows how to break the Genjutsu. Besides that, I've overheard your conversation and have become a danger to you. And since you're obviously too weak to kill me, I have you by the balls. If you don't let me help you, I'll simply tell the authorities and get you arrested and figure out how to do it myself.
Zabuza and Ao looked at each other with concern. They then looked back at Obito. Fine, what's your plan? Obito then began to tell them what he had planned. How they needed to get close to Yagura. If they could break the Genjutsu. But they would need to tire him out and make him more susceptible to Obito. After all, one could not simply remove the Genjutsu from Yagura. They would have to do so in a careful fashion as to not cause the failsafe to go off, and that would require Obito entering Yagura's subconscious to free the Three Tails first, and letting the Three Tails free Yagura. How do you know all of this? Ao asked. How do we know you're not secretly working for Yagura? Obito then spoke.
Because if I were, I would have killed you already. I already know of you, your co-conspirators, and the situation. I have a grander view on everything.
How is that, though? Ao asked.
It's because I was a member of the group that sought control over Yagura. It was I who cast the genjutsu in the first place.
The two shuddered in shock. And how do you know we won't turn on you after Yagura's free? Ao asked. Obito took a moment to think.
My relationship with the group has fallen out, and I now actively seek their dismantlement. That's why I'm doing this. The Akatsuki is who you're after, a group who seeks peace through tyranny, and I, having once believed the same, acted against your village. But now, all that matters is freeing Yagura, am I correct?
The two of them looked at each other and nodded.
Then we are in agreement. Now, it's obvious that you know where to get to Yagura. Tell me what you know.
And so they went over the plan. As night fell, they planned to go after Yagura as he slept. Given that one was a member of the 7 ninja swordsmen and the other was a member of the Hunter Nin, both had access to the Mizukage's residence. Having given over Hunter Nin attire to Kakashi and Obito, they helped the two sneak into the building.
If we take him as he sleeps, we may not even need to fight,
Obito said. Ao and Zabuza led the two to the chambers of the Mizukage. Opening the door, they saw a bed in the center of the room, and under the covers was a lump believed to be Yagura. Closing the door and locking it from behind, they crept closer to it. Obito stood on the side that Yagura was facing with his Mangekyo Sharingan active. He pulled the covers back, but as soon as he did, he discovered nothing but a log. Above them, on the ceiling, in full combat attire with his signature hooked spear at the ready, Yagura attacked. From there, the windows were breached by Hunter Nin. How did he know? Zabuza questioned. Obito knew. Likely these two incompetent shinobi spoke too loudly about this in an area where ears were listening. Yagura actually graced them with an answer though. It was one of your own men. They were a plant by me the whole time and told me everything you'd planned. As Kakashi, Zabuza, and Ao faced the Hunter Nin, Obito faced Yagura alone. Obito would pull his sickle scythe with a kunai chain to the end of it and began to face off against him. The massive club was a heavy weapon, one that Obito thought would be better served to be avoided with Kamui, rather than blocked with his blade. Blocking with the blade would likely lead to it shattering, and he would need it. Oh, how easily he could kill Yagura right now. But the Mizukage was required to be alive, so he went about pushing him back. He needed to leave Yagura at a point where he felt the need to add a tailed beast chakra to his own, so he would strike Yagura and force him to exhaust himself until the point where he would need to enter his version 2 cloak. By doing so, he would ensure that Yagura's mental defenses were low enough to allow Obito to steamroll through his blockade and dominate his will. Yagura, being knocked back into a wall, was sweating and breathing deeply. You're going to face the wrath of a perfect Jinchuriki, Yagura shouted. And just as Yagura began calling upon the powers of his tailed beast, Obito would suddenly cast his genjutsu. He would enter Yagura's mind and witness him drawing chakra from his 3 tails. He would walk over and grab Yagura by the collar and rip him away from the beast. Yagura was in shock.
Stay there and be a good boy,
Obito said as he looked toward the beast. His Sharingan glowed as his gaze met Isobu's. Obito then spoke. Release. Suddenly, Isobu fell out of genjutsu. At about this time, Yagura came from behind to kick Obito but went straight through him. Obito would grab that collar once again, and instead, this time he lifted Yagura up into the air before slamming him back onto the ground with a thud.
I'm going to leave you alone now, and you're going to fix your village. The Akatsuki are now your enemies, not your own people.
And with that, Obito was gone. He came back to his senses in the real world just quick enough to phase through a blade planned to strike him down. He turned around and simply walked through the Hunter Nin, ignoring him as if it were nothing, causing the Hunter Nin to shudder in terror.
It's time to go,
Obito said to the others. Kakashi looked back. Kinda busy right now. It was then that Yagura woke up. Release them, he shouted. The Hunter Nin looked over in confusion. This wasn't an assassination attempt. These 4 freed me from some genjutsu cast upon me by a group of dark-cloaked shinobi with red clouds on their vesture. These 4 are patriots. The Hunter Nin then stopped fighting. Kakashi pulled back, as did Ao and Zabuza. Ao and Zabuza are to be commended for placing the safety and honor of the village above their own lives. And as for these other shinobi that helped them, they too must be rewarded. What are your names? Yagura asked. Obito looked back.
As far as you know, we don't have names. Just do what's good for your village, and remember what I said to you.
Obito then looked to Kakashi and signaled. It's time to get out of here. Kakashi got close to him, and Obito utilized Kamui to escape before they could be ratted on by Zabuza and Ao if they decided to do that. They would appear back at the docks, where they'd begin to take a boat back to Konoha. And as they did, they removed the masks given to them by Ao. A nice memento of our journey, Kakashi said. As Obito looked the mask over, he began to wonder if he couldn't somehow make this work. After all, he'd grown accustomed to wearing masks. A coat of paint and a new marking for the hidden leaf, and it would be perfect for him. So what was that back there? Kakashi asked. Old habits dying hard, Obito said. It's not easy to reinvent yourself, Kakashi. When Rin died, I was shattered, and I had to rebuild myself from the ground up. It's just hard to change that. I suppose I'll always be the same way, dark and manipulative. But if I can possibly use these skills for the advancement of the leaf, then that's what I'm gonna do. Kakashi agreed. We need to return to Minato-sensei and inform him of what happened. Obito then spoke. Then we can begin to target the Akatsuki for real. And that's where I think I'm gonna stop it for the time being. I always liked the way that Obito did things in Naruto. He felt like a true shinobi to me. Espionage, manipulation, he turned Naruto into a true political and espionage thriller. But anyway, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when we drop more videos like this. Peace out.